All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another Future Focused live Q&A. I am your host, Christopher Lind, and for those of you who may be new to this, if you didn't, hang on one second here. I forgot to hit a button. All right. Anyway, if for those of you who may be newer to this, this is my live weekly Q&A session where I cover questions on topics that I've curated from the community, revolving around three of the biggest things that have happened in the last week or so. I am live, so feel free, if you're joining me, you can ask questions. I will watch the comments as best I can and keep tabs on that. And then we'll get into it. One of the topics this week, so just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about this week. So first of all, I do have an update to the RLI, which is the Remote Labor Index, which has to do with how AI agents are performing compared to real work. I visited some research on this back in November, so I want to touch on it again. There's been an increase, and there's a whole bunch of headlines talking about the 50% improvement to AI agents, which is rather misleading. So I want to talk about that one. I also want to talk about what happened this week. Over the past week, there's been some drama between Anthropic and the Department of Defense and what their $200 million contract is doing and what they're fighting against. So I've got some questions that I've curated around that. And then the third topic, I want to talk about the rise of this whole prediction market. For those of you joining on Substack, you may have seen a new little icon, a little badge there that has to do with now you can talk about prediction markets. They're integrating that right into a lot of platforms. This is very much kind of the normalization of everyday gambling. So I've got some questions, but again, I'm live. So if you have questions, you can ask them and we'll get into it. So the first one has to do with the RLI, which comes out of it's a new standard in artificial intelligence. And it's one that you should be following, because if you follow AI at all, you probably hear all these new updates. Every time a new model releases, they've got some new detail on, these break these benchmarks and we're this close to AGI or ASI, or, it's a bunch of very confusing things. And one of the challenges with it is it often translates terribly over into real work. And so if you were to actually try and use one of these agents, it doesn't really matter if it blew every benchmark if you ask it to go do something that you actually needed to do and it performs poorly. So RLI, which is the Remote Labor Index, was designed to correct that. And essentially what it is, it's an AI benchmark where they actually they compare artificial intelligence agents against real human workers. And they compare, how do they do? So if I were to go ask a freelancer, here's what I need from you, and what would I get back from them versus what would I get back from an AI agent, and how well does it do? And so they first released some stuff in October. They have an update 3 months later, and they're saying there's been a 50% increase in AI agent performance, which sounds really good. I mean, it does. But then when you actually look behind the numbers and you're like, okay, they're 50% better than they were before. Well, you would have to know that 3 months ago, they were performing at 2.5% capability, which basically means 97.5% of the time, if you sent something to an AI agent, it came back unacceptable. Like, it wasn't even like best in class. It was like, was this even acceptable compared to a human? So 97.5% of the time, it was not. That number has now squeaked down to 96.25 because the new benchmark is AI agents best case scenario are performing at 3.75. Now, I still would argue these numbers are extremely generous, because when you look at the detail of the instructions they're giving prompts and things like that, it's not like they're just like, hey, go get this for me, and then it does it. They're very detailed prompts that really, in my opinion, only a subject matter expert would be able to give to AI. So it's even a little misleading to say it's successful 3.75% of the time. But the big thing with this is a far cry from the AI agents are on the verge of taking all human labor. They're as capable or more capable than your human employees right now, which is extremely tragic, because company after company keeps wiping out more and more people on the promise that AI agents are going to replace their workforce. Now, this topic in particular, I'm doing a deeper dive on for my podcast next Monday. So if you follow my stuff, you'll see on Monday, I'm doing a deep dive on the updated remote labor index. Today, I just have a few basic questions on it. But one of the things I thought was really interesting is just this week, this just goes to show, and I consistently see this in the consulting work I'm doing right now. A lot of companies that have what I would say made the mistake of automating and eliminating employees on the promise of AI agent payoff, it's not going well. And just this week, Amazon back last year was just talking about their Blue Jay robot. It was going to be the full automation of, what they do in their manufacturing or their supply chain stuff. They were not going to need humans anymore. And it doesn't work in the chaotic world of real life. So it works fine when Amazon packages are neat and they follow a perfect order, but all of a sudden you put a bag of dog food next to a lamp and this, world-class AI robot can't do it just completely malfunctions. And so Amazon had to completely scrap it. And they got rid of quite a few people on the promise that this was going to work. So that's just one of countless examples where companies who thought they'd be able to automate all their employees are quickly discovering, boy, real work is a lot messier, and AI is a lot less capable. So it's a combination of the two, that work is harder than people assume. And these AI tech bros, all think their agents can just do everything because they don't really understand how work gets done. And then on top of it, the AI is just not performing the way I will engage with the comments, but only if they're relevant to what I'm talking about. But AI is not performing as well. And so anyway, is RLI a perfect assessment of AI? It's not perfect by any means. And I talk about that next week. So if you follow my stuff, you'll hear me go deep on that. But it's much better. And so it's one of the indexes, the benchmarks I encourage people to take a look at when they're saying, well, how good is AI at actually doing human work? And needless to say, based on where we are right now, it's not doing real great. No, I'm not Bill Burr. I'm Christopher Lind. But anyway, so that's where we're at. We're at that right now. So some of the questions. So the 3 questions I got that I curated from my communities about this related to the remote labor index and some of the stuff related to this. So the first one was this: while the 50% increase, which mind you, 50% increase is it went from 2.5% at its max to now 3.75% at its max. So still dismal. We're under 5% of what it can do. It sounds impressive in the headlines, and there are headlines everywhere that AI agents have improved 50% in the last 3 months. Does the fact that AI still fails nearly 97% of the time, which it does, suggest that the replacement narrative is vastly outpacing the technology's actual capability? So, it's a very good question. I know the person who asked this, and yes, and I talk about this regularly, that this idea that AI is on the brink of replacing humans is like the narrative we hear constantly, that fusion energy is on the brink. And granted, Helion just had a really big breakthrough, but every time fusion has a really big breakthrough, they just keep discovering how much how much more complicated it is. It's similar to autonomous vehicles. We're just on the brink of autonomous vehicles, and then now we just had Waymo get busted a couple weeks ago that their vehicles are actually being controlled remotely out of third world countries. And you're like, wait, I thought we were on the verge of autonomous vehicle. Oh, well, I guess autonomous means exploitative labor practices type of a thing. So the same is true with AI agents, right? It sounds impressive. We keep being told we're on the verge of AI replacement, and then the data comes back, and these agents get put in real world scenarios where things aren't nice and clean, where things don't happen the same way every time, where we've grossly underestimated what real work requires. Because the other thing that oftentimes people don't take into account with AI agents is the fact that it's trained on the data it has. And while, yes, lots of things are happening digitally, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get captured in the data. And so what these agents are trained on is still only a fraction of what real humans do. And like it's missing so much. There's so many missing pieces. And so then never mind the fact that in the real world, nothing ever goes clean. And anybody who's watching this right now, like, you can attest to this. Like, you could be doing your job your whole career and you go into a scenario, you're like, this is going to be once and done. I'm in and out. This is going to be no big deal. And then you get in, you're like, well, actually turns out this came up and I've never faced this before, type of a thing. And AI just does not handle that well. And so again, my advice in the consulting I do is like, do not automate off your employees. You're going to clean up a mess vastly bigger than you started with. And the data proves it. It's not just Christopher's opinion. It's not me being anti-AI, because I'm actually very supportive of using AI surgically. But the data is just not there. And yeah, you know, David, that's just it. You know, well, so it's a fair point, David, depending on how you're framing this. Yes, it's not just trained on the information it's given, although GPTs are generative pre-trained transformers. So they have a pre-trained set of data that it's trained on. That's what the model's trained on. And then it goes out into the wild after human testing and all this other stuff. And they're trying to get to real world training, like continuing to enhance it. But as we know from like the Twitter bot, it does not work. It goes off the rails really quick. So yeah, it's pulling in all this stuff from all over the place in its pre-trained data set, whatever that is. And each time we get a model release, there's an update to that pre-trained data set that enhances it. But again, no matter what, it's still missing a ton of the contextual data that people have in the real world. We don't do everything digitally. And so any AI agent that you have is incomplete in terms of, what's going on. I will quick deviate on this one, real quick question or kind of comment from letters. The AI is government funded 100%. And I mean, kind of, sort of, but now the fact, yes, in terms of video content and things like that. Yeah. I mean, I talk regularly about the fact that, you got to be really careful about the content you consume, because it is really easy to generate deepfake stuff. So, and that's only going to get worse as the models continue to advance. It has more data. We keep inputting more into it and things like that, which is why even with this first topic, the remote labor index, people are hearing agents are 50% better. People half the time don't even go look up what that means. They just start freaking out because they heard agents are 50% better. They don't realize it jumped from 2.5% effective to 3.75. And so more than anything, and that again is just why we got to slow down and actually process this stuff. Okay, so the second question related to this one, high profile setbacks like Amazon. Well, okay, hang on. So David, it is pre-trained. Yes, it is. And yes, they're also doing some real-time stuff. So it is not all real-time that it's happening. It is pulling some of that in, and it is combining that along. These models are built on pre-trained stuff. So it is a combination of stuff. But anyway, so the second one, with the high profile setbacks like Amazon pulling their new robot for failing basic tasks, we're understanding the sheer complexity of the last mile in automation. So let me pull on this one. So Amazon pulling this reliability gap. And I talk about capability versus reliability in terms of how it works. Capability is like, how does it do on a benchmark? What does it actually do for all this other stuff? How do we think it can do? How does it pass a test would be the way I would frame that up. Reliability, on the other hand, is like, how effective is it actually in performing this consistently in a real world environment? And so this person who asked the question, like, are we underestimating the complexity of the last mile in automation? 100% we are underestimating that. This happens all the time. And, you look at any of these big, like innovative founders, why aren't we on Mars yet? Why haven't we colonized the moon? Why do we not have fusion energy? Why do we not have autonomous vehicles? Why are AI agents like starting to flatline and hit glass ceilings? And it's because things move really quick in innovation for a period of time. And then you get to what's called the last mile, and you realize this is like, we are nowhere near as far as we thought we were. And the finish line just keeps getting pushed out further and further, because now you're not doing the easy stuff. In the beginning, you're kind of like flying. And then you get to the end when you're in that like final stage of like, okay, now we actually got to put this in the real world. And this is why these things are getting completely blown up left and right, because it's a lot harder when you actually get into the fine tuning. It's fine when your margin of error is 50%, but when you got to get your margin of error down to 5%, 3%, things like that, it's not. It gets extremely complicated, and things like that. And so anyway, that is a big part of why, we're grossly overestimating what's happening with things. And I think, that's where, when I hear these doomsday narratives about, AI and David, I'll respond to your comment here in a minute. AI and where we're going and all this other stuff. I think we're a long ways off from a lot of the stuff. And most of the stuff I say, we're never even going to get to. I think a lot of this stuff is doomsday prophecies that just AI can't do it. It can't do it. And this is why the AI industry is a bit in free fall right now. They're freaking out in many ways because they are way overspent. They are hemorrhaging cash, and they can't actually demonstrate on a lot of the checks they wrote. They had a lot of checks that they cashed, and they said, we're going to be able to do this. We're going to be able to do all of this stuff. And it just doesn't work, because that last mile is a very, very long mile. And I think we're probably not going to see that for a while. So David, I'll do a little double checking into it. In terms of Grok, I'm not super familiar with Grok. So if you're saying, it is 100%, there's zero pre-trained data. I mean, that's how the model was originally built. So that doesn't just disappear. And last check I did, it was not being updated in real time 100%. I know that a lot of the companies are striving towards that, but it's been a disaster every time they do. So I don't have time. I'm live, so I'm not going to fact check it right now, but I'll take your word that, they are doing a lot more with the live time stuff, which I guess that may also be why Grok is such a hot mess half the time. Because if it is, they're probably leaning more into just updating the model in real time. So, and dude on roll, I'm not familiar with symbolic AI. If you tell me a little bit more about what it does, I might be able to just even contextualize it, because I'm probably familiar with some of the other platforms. I know, David, I know Grok is used by the military, and I like I said, I'll double check it, but no AI companies are successfully doing real-time updates, at least last I checked on some of the actual safety research I'm doing. So unless Grok's gone completely off the rails, then, I mean, like I said, I'll take your word at it and look into it and come back to it. But symbolic AI, I'm not familiar with that one. But let me know what it is, and I'm happy to kind of give some perspective on why I think it might not have taken off, because there's a lot of these AI companies right now that are trying stuff, and it's kind of like spittering out, and I can maybe give some commentary on what I'm seeing similarly to it. Okay, the third question related to this RLI, remote labor index stuff. So for the leaders feeling pressured, somebody asked me, for leaders feeling pressured to automate everything right now, which I work with a ton of senior executives right now, and there is enormous pressure. I had three comments, or three potential clients that I was going to work with in 2026 who we were talking about in 2025. And I'm like, you got to move. And they actually all got let go over the holidays and in January because they were behind. So for those of you who may be down the line who are like, what the heck is actually going, like, why are my bosses or my boss's bosses driving so hard to automate, like implement AI? It's because they're getting huge pressure from boards, from shareholders, and not that shareholders are saying automate everything. It's that they've got to drive down profits. They've got to improve on, all this other stuff. And so there's a ton of pressure, and everybody's hearing these narratives. This is the other thing. Everybody's hearing the idea that AI can do what any human can do and better. And so when everybody's hearing that, they're like, well, why aren't companies making more money? Or why isn't everything faster, cheaper, and all this other stuff? And so it puts these organizations under tremendous pressure. And so they're all feeling this pressure to automate everything right now. The question, though, is the smart play to wait until the failure tax drops like below 90%, which would mean the RLI would have to get up to like 90%. Like you would have to have, we're at 3.75%. It'd have to climb to 90%. Even at the trajectory we're on right now, that actually, in my opinion, it would be foolish for a senior leader or even just anybody professional to go, I'm going to wait until AI actually is vastly more capable before I do anything. Because the reality is, if it's under your oversight and care, it's actually pretty effective. You just wouldn't want to put it in the hands of somebody who doesn't know what they're doing or just straight up automating something. That's where it's like extremely like a mess. And so I actually think this is the danger right now, is a lot of people, because it's changing constantly. And even if you look at the RLI data, the models are like, the one that was in the lead 3 months ago is now like in 4th place. The one they're bouncing all over the place. And so everybody is kind of like, well, do we just wait? Do we just hold off? And I would say absolutely not. You just don't hold off. David, it sounds like, as a business owner, you agree. I work with small business owners. I work with large businesses. I use it in my own life. And I'm like, you shouldn't just be waiting and going, let's see how this goes, because not to fuel the hype, but it's like people are figuring out how to use it successfully. It is capable in the right hands and when used in the right use cases. And so as more and more people are picking up on that, if you're doing just I'm going to just sit back and wait and see, you're falling behind at a pace that is insane. Like, as much as I'm dogging on the remote labor index going from 2.5 to 3.75%, I mean, that is 50% improvement in 3 months. That's a lot. And Anthropic is leading now at the 3.75%. And I just talked to somebody today who's using Anthropic's latest, I can't remember, it's Opus, I think. And they're like, it's a lot better. Like, it's a lot better. So it is noticeably improving at a really, really quick rate. And that's one of the things where even when I do small pilots or I'll do surgical implementations or tests in organizations, we're like revisiting things that, even 3 months ago or last month couldn't be done, to be like, you got to kind of stay on top of this, because just because you couldn't do it before or the error rate was super high before, it's changing really fast. And so I know that right now everybody's kind of like exhausted and fatigued and feeling like burned out. So you got to do it with wisdom. And I don't advocate people just like burn the candle at both ends. But the idea or the answer to the question of like, should I just sit back and wait till we're at 90%? No. Definitely, I would not advise that. The sit back and wait mentality is a dangerous one, and it will, or very likely may, cost you your job, or put your company, way behind if you're just like, well, we're just going to kind of wait and see what happens. So again, don't take anything I say like on a live stream as like universal, because every time I work with somebody, there's always, just like we talked about in this section, like the last mile, there are general principles that I say are pretty universally applicable that I'll share with folks. There's the general principles, and then there's the like, yeah, but then there's the final mile of how does this actually work in practice. And I will say, even when I've worked with businesses that are in the same industry, same size, like same customer base, we do things different with each instance, because the nuance, the priorities of a company, the employee base they have, their competitive advantage, like you just end up moving things around. So just because I say, like, yes, stay on top of AI, how you do that is not going to look the same. And that's one of, I guess I'll add this and I'll change to topic number 2, is be really careful trying to copy somebody else's playbook. That's honestly one of the biggest mistakes I see people making right now, is they read like, oh, this company did this and I bought their, prompts or their agents or whatever. Or even a lot of these AI companies that are like, hey, we implemented this agent for this customer. We can speed up your implementation by just copying their stuff. And I'm like, you don't want to do that. Like, everybody's trying to skip the hard work of figuring out how to do it well. That's a fool's errand, I will tell you right there. And you will end up paying for it in the long term. Okay, so let's move on to topic 2, because this is a hot button one right now. So Anthropic and the Pentagon are kind of going back and forth right now, because it got kind of, reports are starting to circle that Claude was potentially used for coordinating some of the logistics back in the whole Venezuelan operation and kind of the kidnapping of Maduro down in Venezuela. And so Anthropic's pushing back, kind of saying, we don't really want to be used for this. And so the DoD is kind of going, well, too bad. We have a $200 million contract with you. And Anthropic's going, well, okay, but this isn't really what we wanted our technology used for. And so it's creating this whole conversation around the ethics behind this, because Anthropic has a perspective on how they think their AI should be used. Obviously, the DoD has a very different perspective. My goal here isn't to get into the politics of Venezuela or AI, used in all this other stuff, but it does raise some really good questions. And they were questions that I wanted to tackle, because I think this is one of the real risks we're all going to end up dealing with, the fallout of a lot of this stuff. Because Anthropic is largely known as the AI company that has really built its brand around safety and constitutionality. And yeah, I mean, I feel like they do a lot of like talking out of both sides of their mouth. But in the industry, Anthropic is known as the more ethical one, that's committed to safety, committed to governance, committed to the well-being of people. And so that's largely why they had such a reaction when all of a sudden it came out. It's like, wait, I thought you guys were the good guys. You're being used for mass surveillance type of a thing. And so Anthropic naturally is kind of pulling back, freaking out, going, uh-oh, this kind of like blew the lid off this stuff. But the question the person asked is like, well, can a company like Anthropic, is it reasonable for them to build a whole brand around safety and the well-being of everybody and all this other stuff, while then also accepting a 9-figure defense contract? Like, was this an ethical collision? Like, was this inevitable that we were going to run into this moment when they took the money? And here's where I think it's complicated. Because if you've ever worked on big contracts, you will realize there is all this like really fine legalese language that gets put into things that you won't get a deal signed unless you agree to it. But there's also not really a lot of context to like, what does this mean? And it's intentionally written in a way where you're not really sure. You're not really sure where that could go. And so is there a world where Anthropic, and I do think to some degree, maybe, I mean, I wasn't part of the decision to sign this $200 million deal. Do I think there's room where Anthropic may have underestimated what the DoD was going to do with its technology, and they got a little excited about a $200 million contract because all the AI companies right now are desperate for money? They might have, agreed to some terms in a contract that they thought, I'm sure they won't do this. I'm sure it won't go here. And then they signed it. And now it's like, wait, you did go there? Like, we didn't, and it technically falls within the bounds of what they agreed to. Do I think there's a world where, that might have squeaked by and they didn't think that? Yeah. But I do think this opens up the question of, if you're signing a deal with the Department of Defense for $200 million, I do think it's unreasonable to then show up and go, well, now we want to say when and how you can use our technology, and we really don't like it used. Like, you kind of lost some of that. Right. And so do I think if Anthropic really didn't want to get into what the DoD has a reputation of doing, I mean, they signed the contract after the current administration was in place. So, I mean, unless you really weren't even paying attention to what's going on, like, yeah, you knew where things were going. Like, I mean, they rebranded to the Department of War. Like, what did you think they wanted to use AI for? They've been partnering with Palantir. Like, you think they want to use it for high, above bar ethical use cases? Like, no, they want to scrape as much data as they can so that they can accomplish whatever agenda they've got. So I do think, though, and I see this all the time, this isn't just related to, AI contracts between Anthropic and DoD. People love to dance as close to the line they don't want to cross as possible, and get in bed with, companies or situations that are ethically gray, and they kind of want plausible deniability. And then when they get called on it, or they get caught in a honey trap, they're like, oh no, like, wait a minute, we aren't okay with this. And it's like, well, that's kind of what happens when you do this kind of stuff. And I agree, David. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't know what they were doing when they signed a $200 million deal with the DoD. I am not suggesting that they didn't. Do I think it's possible that in the name of plausible deniability, they kind of like kept things really vague and maybe looked the other way a little bit to get the deal through, and kind of was like, but we'll hold on to our integrity if it really comes down to it? Kind of like, hopefully it never comes to that, because we're hoping that it doesn't go this way. I think there's room that there may have been some of that, but to me, that's not like better. That's my thing. Like, I don't think you're better if you look the other way and, slide things under the rug and then go, oh, oops. So I wouldn't give Anthropic a pass, even if they came back and said, well, technically, we didn't know that this was going to be doing. Well, you did a $200 million deal with the DoD. Your job was to know what exactly they were going to do with that technology. And I understand things go sideways every once in a while. I understand there are unexpected turns that pop up that you didn't anticipate for, that weren't necessarily 100% fleshed out in the contract. But the DoD using your AI for heavy surveillance, if you try and tell me you didn't know that's what they were going to do, you are full of hot air. Like, that is a load of crap. And so I don't appreciate Anthropic kind of trying to play both sides of this. Like, yeah, we took $200 million, but we never thought the Department of War would use our technology for these kinds of things. Yes, you did. You at least suspected, and maybe you just didn't ask questions and hoped it would never come out. And I think that's one of the things that my warning to, I even tell this to companies when they're implementing AI all the time, when they're like, well, do we really need safeguards in this? And I'm like, well, if you intentionally avoid asking the questions, and a good example of this, okay, this is blown up multiple times in the HR space. All the time in the HR space, companies are looking for ways to streamline their hiring practices. They want to streamline their hiring practices, and AI hiring is a great way to do it. You just slap an AI agent on it. It'll scan everybody's resumes. It'll do all the interviews for you, and it'll give you your top picks and blah, blah, blah. Like, right. Sounds great on paper. Anybody who's been in HR for any period of time knows that rapid automation using AI that is built by who knows what on whatever data sets it was built on is going to be riddled with problems. it's going to be riddled with problems. It's going to be biased. It's going to like operate off age-old like HR nightmares, legal things, like all this. It's not going to be up to date with the current like labor laws and all this other stuff. And in the name of hurrying, people will go, oh, we didn't know. We just went with Workday because we thought it'd be fine. And it's like, nah, no. You don't get to play that game. You don't get to try and cut corners in hiring and try and then shirk responsibility on Workday. And granted, I think Workday, if you're going to go out there and sell a product that promises to automate hiring, yeah, you hold some responsibility. But I don't give corporate executives a pass when then they just kind of go, oops, not our fault. It's like, yes, it is. You made the decision. You signed the contract. You bought the promises that you knew were too good to be true. I've got 8 kids and I tell them all the time, if something sounds too good to be true, it is. It is too good to be true. And so when you just go, well, maybe if I don't ask follow-up questions, maybe if I don't look into it, then I can pretend it is too good to be true and hope it doesn't go sideways. Sorry, you're accountable for that crap. And this is a major problem that I actually think, and that's why I wanted to use the Anthropic versus the DoD conversation, because this is a perfect example of things that we're seeing left and right. It's happening in the crypto markets. It's happening in what we're going to be talking about next, prediction markets. It's happening in hiring. It's happening all over the place where people are wanting to take the shortcut. They know that it's probably requiring some sort of like unethical things. And then they're just like, yeah, but maybe if I don't ask, I won't be the one responsible for it. No, you are 100% responsible. And so, like I said, do I understand why Anthropic might be not thrilled with what the DoD is doing with its technology? I'm sure they are, if for no other reason than it's a PR nightmare, and it kind of blew a hole in their whole brand of we are the good guys. We are the good AI committed to the well-being of everybody. And it was like, oh, really? Is that why you took $200 million to do, mass surveillance on people with your tech, with the DoD? It blew that up. And so if nothing else, it's a PR nightmare for them. But going back to it, that's what you get when you sign deals like this. You make a deal with the devil. You don't get to argue with the devil when he tells you need to do something that you don't want to do. It's like, well, that's what you get. And so that's kind of where that one is. So the second question I got related to this. Yeah. And David, I agree with you. It'll blow over. They're a big AI company. I think it was just a big embarrassment for them. And I hope at least people are starting to realize these AI companies, they don't have your best interest in mind. Like anybody who thinks any of these AI companies have their best interest in mind, you're missing the forest through the trees. Like all they care about is money. All they care about is money and power. And, so they're going to do whatever they need to do to get that. And so you should use their AI products accordingly. Like if you think they're going to protect you, they're not going to protect you. If you think they're going to stand up for you when things go sideways, they'll sell you out, the second. And that's where when a bunch of this other stuff, people were like, when Grok got in trouble for doing all this, like creating basically inappropriate content with kids, I'm like, what are you doing? Those of you who are doing this crap, you think, they're not going to sell out anybody who's done that if they take heat? Like the whole reason they tried to monetize it was so that they could grab all your user data. And then that way, if they ever came under fire, they could just sell those people out as a way to cut a deal. So, just these AI companies don't have your best interest in mind. So that comes up to the next question. Yeah, I mean, true. I agree with you on that one. I don't know that I agree with complete control means a better future. Like if you really want to trust the future to the tech companies and the government, let me know how that goes for you. But that's not a bright future based on what their priorities are. Okay, so the other question I got, when we talk about AI in defense, where do we draw the line between national security and the normalization of mass surveillance on the civilian population? It's a really good question, and we got into, this all kind of got blown up, and it was you can look back at what the CIA was doing back in the 70s and 60s, and so it's a lot of people think like this whole AI spying and AI. I'm not going to answer that question. I have a wife and kids, so no to your comment. But so related to this, like the idea that the AI companies, this whole thing is new. This whole thing is new, and now the government's surveilling us, and now there's mass surveillance, and they're doing all this stuff. I mean, they've been doing this forever. If you look at the AT&T building and what AT&T's been doing with phone records and all this, I mean, basically the idea of privacy has been a bit of a myth for, a long time. Like if you thought the government and, these powerful companies, if people knew what was in the servers on most of these big tech companies, they would be horrified if they knew how much data they had on everybody. So this idea that like, it's new. It's a big problem that just kind of popped up with AI. Like, no, how do you think they trained all these models? They've been capturing all this data forever. Exactly. Exactly, party boy. Like they've had the code. I mean, they've had it and they've had this data for a long time. They just couldn't do anything with it for a long time. And in many cases, that's what these big AI models knew or did. Once these models came out, all of a sudden, all these big agencies and companies were like, sweet, we've been sitting on all this data of people's forever that we had no time or resources to go through. Now we can just dump this in, now we can just dump this in stuff, and then we can, do something with it. And so I think that's it. Now, where do we draw the line? This is where I do think as citizens, and like, I mean, let's stick to the US for now, but we've got voting power, to some degree. I mean, we've got, protests, and there's things we can do to try and push against some of this stuff. Where do we draw the line? I will tell you right now, good luck getting anybody to agree on this. I bet we can't even get people in the comments based on the different perspectives I'm seeing in my comments section right now. I bet you couldn't even get 2 people in the comments to agree to anything right here. Because where that line, you're going to get people that say we should surveil literally everything everyone does, and this should be Minority Report. Like, I love the government, and this is not me saying this. You're going to get people who say, I love the government. They're the best. The future's best in their hands. And so we should be surveilling everything they do. And we should have predictive algorithms that are determining who's going to be a criminal and who's not. And we bring Minority Report to life, and Black Mirror happens in the next 3 years. You're going to get those people. And then you're going to get people on the other end who say, like, they have no need for any data on anybody, and anything like that is a violation of your privacy. And then you're going to have people, like a million people in the middle, that are going to feel somewhere, in between. I tend to fall like a little bit in the middle, where it's one of those things where, kind of like the whole DoD and Anthropic, I mean, you're using these social media platforms for free. Well, how do you think they pay for that? By stealing your data. Like, you are the product. I tell everybody, if something's free, you're the product. So, you're using these platforms for free. Like, well, what do you think they're doing? They're harvesting as much data on you as they humanly can, so they can sell it, they can market to it, they can, trade it off to whatever companies they want. They can boost their valuations. Is that right? I don't like that they do it to the level they do. I think it's ridiculously unethical, the amount of data and the lengths they go to use cookies to literally steal. Like, they're not just, like, as an example, Facebook is not just looking at your Facebook data. There's a reason they hook it into everything. There's a reason your iPhone's like, do you want to give it access to other apps? Like, it's literally a vacuum cleaner for everything that it can get its fingers on. And that's true of pretty much any of this big tech stuff. If you have a Google account or you're using Google Chrome, why do you think they want you to use their browser? So that they can see every website you go to and every single thing you click on. And so they can do all that and they can farm it back and then figure out how to market to you and target you and sell your data off to a data broker that's going to do something with it. Like, so to some degree, there is this like contract we sign up for when we accept this. Yeah, well, David, don't even get me started. I did that a couple of weeks ago. I talked about these freaking AI glasses that, what do they call them now? Anybody who wears them, glass holes. That one made me laugh. So if you're caught wearing like AI glasses, don't be surprised if people rip them off your face and smash them in front of you. Not saying that I advocate for that, but I'm just saying don't be surprised if that happens. And then don't be surprised if you hear yourself called a glass hole to your face or maybe behind your back. But again, it's all part of this data harvesting. They just want as much data with or without your consent as they can possibly get. And it's, you can say, well, to some degree, you kind of have to go along with it because basically everything is digital now. But at the same time, I don't remember, I saw, yeah, you're right, David. It's not free. It's a data trade-off, which that's what I mean. You are the product. But somebody said it before, like, we do need to kind of like push back on this. Tragically, most people don't really understand this. Like a lot of the people that follow my stuff tend to be a little more tech savvy. So they're maybe a little more aware, but I still talk to a lot of people who are literally shocked that their apps and their internet data, like they're like, no, I use a VPN. I'm like, what do you think the VPN's doing? They're freaking sucking up all the data themselves. And now they've centralized it under them. Like, what do you think they do? They sell it off. Like it's the same thing. So I think as more people start to realize this, you are going to get more people pushing back. I do think people need to be more intentional about what apps they use, what products they buy. But then you also have to kind of sit with the fact that it's like, well, like, unless you're going to go off the grid, and even then there's so much stuff out there that unless you're going to start using gold coins and only work through bargaining and bartering and live, under like, you're like, I really don't know how you get away from the fact that your data is being harvested largely. I don't know that you can fully escape it. Are there things I think we should rightfully push back on? Absolutely. Should there be greater accountability? Yes. Like there are more things we should be pushing for. But what that looks like, we're never going to get anybody to agree on that. And I think that's where, if we could instead get away from this, like we have to have it all or nothing, but if we could, like, I call them AI red lines or data red lines. If we could get people from different sides of the political aisle and different worldviews to come together and go, hey, can we at least draw some like red lines where we say, we don't do this. Like we don't collect data on this, or we make sure people are informed of the data that they're giving away and they know how it's being used. I talked about it 2 weeks ago, how a lot of these companies, these big companies, acquire all these little companies, not because they care about the product. They crush the product. They get rid of it. They just want their data. I mean, look at, if anybody knows, this one, actually, no, I think this was a startup. Like look up the Honey scam. Everybody know what Honey is? Anybody know what Honey is? That browser extension that would find you coupons. And now it's coming out that it was a massive, massive scam to harvest data from companies, harvest data from users. Like it was, PayPal's taken some big hits right now over this. But yeah, David, I agree with you. Like to some degree, it's where we're going. I think that's where, I think I saw somebody ask like, so what do we do about it? I think it's about just being informed and just being aware of stuff. Last week, I talked about the fact, like, if you're walking around in Ray-Ban AI glasses and you have home ring cameras throughout your house and outside, just know, like, you are paying to have your data stolen from you. You're paying a monthly service fee to have your data stolen. Like, that is what they're doing. And so, like, if you're fine with that, if you're like, I don't care, let them steal as much data about me and my family and everything that happens. I mean, I guess if you're fine with that, if you're not, then don't. Going back to the question, is Duck safe? I'm guessing you're asking about DuckDuckGo, but there's really no tech product that's safe. That's actually one of the biggest things that I tell people all the time. Don't ever assume anything's safe. It's not. No tech product is safe. So it's about saying, what am I getting? Assume the worst in terms of what you're giving up, and then just go, is the value transaction there? Or be smart about how you use it, those kinds of things. Because you really can't escape it. Like, I mean, I'm sure somebody could probably come up with a doomsday narrative that would escape things. Maybe you go out into the whatever, you build a doomsday bunker, you go off grid and you never pop up out of the earth for 10 years. Maybe you're safe then, but like outside of that, I don't know how you function in the real world and truly be safe from some of this stuff. There's just no way around it. Okay, so the third question related to this Anthropic and Pentagon one. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm with you, David. It's like, if you want to be totally safe from the tech thing, like, then you kind of have to live like a caveman. And even then, the satellites that they're putting up and, the grids they're putting all over the place, like, you're not really safe, from it. But, okay. So the third one's, let's see. If you're a mission-driven founder, is it possible to maintain control over how your technology is used once you hand it over to the world's most powerful military, or is backing out an illusion? This is similar to a question earlier. So I work with startups a lot, and a lot of startups especially. I do feel like once companies get really big, they kind of like lose their vision. I worked for GE for a long time, and you kind of like, what's the mission of GE? And you're like, I don't think GE even really knows. It's kind of like, just make money every quarter, type of a thing. And so that's why I enjoy startups, because you have smaller teams. They're really excited. They have a vision of what they want to do. And then as they grow, they kind of start to bump into some of this stuff where you're like, okay, so now you're kind of running into it. And that's where Google took all the heat for removing its vision statement, do no evil, or something like that. And they got rid of it. And it was like, well, when you're the size of Google, it kind of becomes hard to say, well, what is evil and according to who, type of a thing. Now, as a mission-driven founder, is it possible to maintain control? I guess that depends on what you mean. And I think this goes back to what I talk about a lot. It's about intentionality in your decision-making. Many people go, well, I want to make a profit at all costs. Okay, well, then that is what is driving you. So if that's what's driving you, it's going to be a lot harder for you to try and hold back what companies do with your technology, because ultimately you're going to take whatever deal you can get that pays you. And you kind of can't do that. Going back to what I said before, the fact Anthropic is like, oh no, we've got $200 million, but we don't really like what the DoD is doing with our tech. Like, BS. Like, whatever, you wanted $200 million. That was more important to you than your tech being used by the Department of Defense for mass surveillance. Like, just own it. That's what it is. And so I think for founders who are mission driven, it's like, well, where do you draw your lines? And if you're not willing to say no, then yeah, you might as well throw your mission out the window. Because if you literally aren't willing to walk away from something, and I do it on the regular. There are people who reach out to me. They want me to come do consulting. And when I ask questions about what they're trying to do, I have to say, no, I'm not going to do it. And they'll go, well, what if we pay you this much? What if we increase your rate to this much? I have to say, no, I'm not going to do it, because what you're asking me to do would be a violation of my ethical red lines. and I'm not going to participate in that. If I wasn't willing to say no, I don't get to go, well, can't you like uphold my ethical red lines for me? They're going to go, no, we're paying you double your rate to do the work that we know is under the bar. Like, no, you don't get to ask us to uphold your stuff for you. And so I think that's one of the things that as a startup, I can't make that decision for anybody. You will be accountable for the decisions you make. So make them carefully. If you're going to sign up to, as an example, I see this with influencers. I'm friends with a bunch of influencers. And one of the things they're all wrestling with is like, do we take deals from all these prediction markets that, are trying to get everybody to be an addictive gambler? They're offering me a ton of cash to do it. And all they want me to do is sit on my live stream and just make predictions so that my audience does it. And I'm like, okay, well, if you want to be participative in getting your audience addicted to gambling, I mean, you're going to own that. You can't take their money and stream it on your live stream and then go, well, but I did put a little asterisk at the bottom that said, if you have a gambling problem, here's the helpline. Sorry, that doesn't absolve you from accountability. You knew what you were getting into. Take responsibility for it. And so again, everybody's going to end up, I don't expect people to have my exact worldview. Everybody's going to land somewhere different, but I think most people don't even know where their lines are. And I think that's a big problem. They just chase whatever, and then they find themselves painted into a corner and they go, well, I don't like where I ended up. And you're like, yeah, well, you maybe should have thought about that before you signed the contract. You can't come and do that, later. So anyway, I will answer this one because yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things. You look at a lot of these companies, they had values to start, and then in the name of keeping, a lot of them took PE money, and if you know PE, they do not care. They don't care about your ethics, and so you take PE money, and those PE companies are going to go, well, you just signed a loan shark deal, so you better do what it takes. And you don't get to go, well, that's not really fair. If I'd known this, I wouldn't have done it. And so, well, then you got to kind of like figure out what you do from there, which is why I tell people, be really careful. So to the question that came before, the Pacific laptops that supposedly protect your data, does such tech exist? Honestly, and Machine Gun Kelly, I see you jumped in on there. Nothing is safe. Nothing is safe. I chuckle every time I'm watching YouTube or something, and there's like a, hey, use this VPN, Surfshark will keep your data safe. I'm like, no, Surfshark just wants all your data, all these things. So nothing is safe. Nothing is safe. And I think that's the thing that and that's not me saying we shouldn't have regulations. That's not me saying we shouldn't have data protection policies. I absolutely think we should. And I think what we have now is pathetic, and there is so much more room for stuff. At the same time, you are also personally responsible for the tech you use and the decisions you make. The way I teach my kids is, don't do anything on or near a digital device you don't potentially want becoming public information. Just don't. And that may seem like an extreme thing, but it's like, hey, just don't do things, because you're not secret. Like, things will get out eventually, and you don't get to choose when they do. And you don't get to go, well, they didn't tell me they were going to leak my data. I mean, does everybody remember the Ashley Madison thing? Remember the it was like that website that was dedicated to like cheating on your spouse, and the user records got leaked, and it was like, you could go search a database of like who's on this thing, and you could look up everybody's email address. And I remember when that happened, and all these people were like, hey, this is a data breach. This isn't fair. And it's like, well, what were you doing signing up on a cheater's website? Like, I'm not saying that it was fine for your data to get leaked, but I mean, that's the risk you run when you're doing things you don't want people to know about, but you're hoping you can hide behind a VPN or encryption or what. You can't. And that's the thing. So just live in such a way that who you are in public is who you are in private. That's my best advice to people when they say, how do I protect myself against data? Don't do stuff that you wouldn't want everybody finding out. There you go. That's what you do. And then we can still hold companies accountable when they leak data, when they get breached. Like, we still can do that. We still can fight for, ethical practices for data usage and informed consent. We can still push for those things. Do not bank on those things protecting you for you. Just don't. You will get burned in the end 100% of the time. Okay. All right. So now, final one. It's a little long, but I have a little extra time today. So, prediction markets. I want to talk about prediction markets because I've been watching these things start coming up. And this is another one of those, no, we're not doing that, but we are. But we don't want people to know that we're doing this. Like, this is gambling. Okay. It's not crypto sites anymore that are doing prediction markets. Now it's like your banking app. Like, there are literal fintech apps fronting themselves as banks where you can literally gamble. Let's just call it what it is. Okay. Prediction market is rhetoric for gambling. There's a reason DraftKings and all this other stuff are saying, like, hey, yeah, we're in prediction markets. We're not into gambling. This is just, trying to guess what's happening here. And so, first of all, let's call it what it is. It's gambling. You are gambling with this. And so these fintech apps that are like, hey, have your paycheck come here. And then you can prediction market and wager on what might happen at this football game or in this police chase, and maybe it'll pay your rent. And it's like, yeah, or they're going to take your money away because the house always wins. Like, that's how this stuff works. This is data as old as time. You will lose. The house will win over time. You might win a few, and then boom, you're gonna get taken to the cleaners on this. And so, like Robinhood, Webull, now there's like fintech apps. I just saw this week Substack. For those of you on Substack, if you saw the little medal, now you can talk about your predictions markets here. All the big YouTubers now are talking about prediction markets, and of course, they're using the language very carefully. Which it's ironic to me that, like, part of me is siding with the gambling industry on this, because, like, the gambling industry is like pissed. They're mad. They're like, wait a minute here. We have like restrictions. We can't just do whatever we want whenever we want to. We have to follow the rules. And now these people go, oh, it's not gambling, it's prediction markets. And they can do whatever they want. They can market to kids. They can be in any state they want. Like, they can do all this stuff. There's no rules around it. So, like, it's wild right now, but just know this is what you're not wealth building. You are not hedging your bets. You are not finding financial hacks. You are gambling, and you will lose on this. So I'll answer this one once because I get it all the time. My teeth are whiter than my earbuds. They aren't actually, but it's because I use a Sonicare twice a day in whitening toothpaste. So there you go. People always comment on my darn teeth. Anyway, okay, these prediction markets are coming everywhere. Just know this. You're going to see them in everything. You're going to see them everywhere. Everybody's going to say this. And yes, some of it is to condition people for this dopamine response and get them hooked on gambling, right? Gambling mechanics get you comfortable with risk, think that you're going to win, give you just enough of a victory to get you, whet your appetite. And then you'll just keep coming back until they completely drain your bank accounts. That's the goal, right? It's a money grab. That's all it is. And so somebody asked, are we witnessing casino, fictation of daily life where, like, prediction markets are being co-opted to hide gambling as financial intelligence? Yes. That is the person that asked this question. Yes, that is 100% of what is going on right now. This is 100% gambling in disguise to rob you blind and convince you, no, you're not gambling. You're actually participating in financial intelligence. And, it's like the stock market. It is not. And the stock market in many ways is gambling, but it's at least somewhat regulated. What prediction markets is unregulated gambling. It's unregulated gambling is what it is. And so it is out there trying to steal every dime that you work for in a really tough economic time. And the part that makes me mad, that I won't laugh at, that really pisses me off, is right now the reason it's hitting so hard is because people are getting desperate. People are struggling financially. People are having a hard time. They're uncertain about their work. They can't pay their bills because energy costs, like all this stuff, is going through the roof. They're wondering, about this stuff. And these prediction market companies are going, you know what desperate people do? Desperate people make really bad decisions with their money in a desperate attempt to try and make it back. I know what we should do. Let's find a way to put gambling in front of them with lucrative promises of financial wealth and stability. And then we'll just fleece them. We'll rob them blind and it'll be great. That is what is happening. And that pisses me off. So just again, if you participate in prediction markets, know that's what you're dealing with. And if you say, well, I budget so much a month to gamble, and so I know that's throwaway money and that's all I do, and I have a ton of self-control, I would say you are playing with fire. But okay, that's your choice to make. But you don't get to jump into the prediction market world, and then when you lose everything, you can't come out the other side and go, hey, wait a minute, I didn't know I was gambling. I thought this was a lucrative financial business transaction. It's not. And you're watching this now, so now you know. So you can't claim ignorance anymore either. David, you are spot on. It's a Ponzi scheme. They're trying to get as many people to dump as much cash as they can before people figure out, because the regulators are coming for this. Like, they're going to figure it out. And the gambling industry is furious about this. They are furious, which, by the way, the gambling industry is not exactly the kind of people you want to piss off. So like, they're not going to back down from this one. So they're either going to try and get in on it, or they're going to come knocking, and some people might be swimming with the fishes if things don't start moving. But just know, some of the second question was like, what are the long-term risks of conditioning people to see mundane or tragic events as dopamine fueled opportunities? Yeah. I mean, this is far bigger than just fleecing you out of your money. This is also about that, like conditioning you to just live on this dopamine high of like, oh my gosh, is this car going to crash? Is this thing going to happen? Is this bank going to get robbed? Is, all this stuff, like, that's, yeah, they want you high, and they want you high because if you're high and you're focused on recovering from just losing your life savings because the Super Bowl didn't go the way you did, you're not actually paying attention to everything else going on. And so it's a big cosmic distraction, and it's designed to target the most vulnerable people. And it pisses me off to no degree. And so there are going to be some real long-term consequences. And so this is why I wanted to bring it up this week, because when I saw it started to eke into just like everything, I'm like, oh my gosh, do people not see this for what it is? And a lot of people don't. And I don't look down on them for not knowing. It's very well crafted. It's very well crafted. There are billions of dollars being spent on marketing this. And oh, by the way, all that data I talked about earlier in the live stream that these companies have been harvesting on you, that is being used to surgically target you for these kinds of things. They're going to know exactly the kinds of things you would be attracted to. They're going to know exactly when you're in financial tough spot, and prediction market is going to be most probable to draw you in. They're going to know the day that your check, runs out, and they can hit you with a prediction market and go, before you pay that energy bill, would you like to gamble on this and maybe win it big? And then you'll have enough to pay your energy bill and buy dinner tonight. Like, they know when to do that. So be alert, be aware. That's what's happening. And then the other one is, the other one somebody brought up, they just said, as we turn state surveillance into a spectator sport, what risks, do we run eroding empathy by turning real world human struggles into another data point? I mean, in some cases, this is like the modern day gladiator games. Like, we're going to watch people's human suffering and be betting on it. And there are going to be people chanting and cheering for horrible things to happen because they wagered they wagered it all on, well, my mortgage is riding on this person actually getting shot. Come on. Like, really? So, but again, do I necessarily think the people behind all these things are inherently thinking all that stuff? I don't necessarily know that they are. Some of the ones I've met definitely are. But a lot of them are just like, we know it's going to make us a boatload of money. We've got all their data. We know what we know what they love. We know what they're going to pay attention to. We know when they're going to be vulnerable to throw away everything they have on the hope of something, and they're going to go for it. And then when they get caught, they're going to go, well, we didn't know this was going to happen. Like, you just watch when this blows up. Every one of these prediction market companies is going to just suddenly not realize any of these negative outcomes were a possibility. They were just trying to offer a service to people during difficult economic times. They were trying to offer good, wholesome entertainment for people. Excuse my French, but bullshit. Bullshit. You know exactly what you are doing. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting. So just, I'm going to close on this because that is this one, watch out. Because this is coming hard and it's coming fast, and it is very well funded, and it is very well marketed, and it is everywhere. And again, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Nobody's offering to double your money. Nobody's offering to double your money. And anybody who says they are just wants to take the money you have for their own gain. So watch out, folks. With that, I hope you have a great Friday. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you found this helpful. Thanks everybody in the comments. This was a ton of fun. I always appreciate the discussion here, and I'll be back likely next week. And with that, we'll see you on the other side.